For a long time, I thought the people who changed their lives had something I didn't. I thought they were smarter, more disciplined, more confident. I figured they had some kind of advantage that I just wasn't born with. Because if they could build a business, change careers, or completely reinvent their lives, why couldn't I? But over the years, I started noticing something strange. Some of the smartest people I've ever met stay stuck for years, and some people with far less talent completely change their lives. So if intelligence isn't the thing that separates them, what is? A few weeks ago, I made a video about how our minds can convince us to stay inside a life we desperately want to escape. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was looking at the wrong problem. Because maybe staying stuck isn't really about intelligence at all. Maybe it's about what intelligence does when fear gets involved. And once I understood that, I started seeing it everywhere, including in my own life. Welcome back to It's Just Monday, a place for people stuck in jobs they hate who are trying to build a way out. And today, I want to talk about the real reason smart people stay stuck in lives they don't actually want to be in. Because on the surface, it doesn't make sense. They're capable, they're thoughtful, they can solve problems for everyone else. But somehow, when it comes to changing their own life, they freeze. And I think one reason is because smart people are really good at thinking. They analyze, they research, they compare, they weigh every option, they think through every possible outcome. And normally, that's a good thing. It's responsible, it's careful, it's logical. But when fear gets involved, that same intelligence can start working against them. Because if you're good at thinking, you're also good at imagining everything that could go wrong. The next job could be worse. You might make less money. You might start over and regret it. You might fail. You might embarrass yourself. You might find out that the thing you hoped would save you doesn't save you at all. And suddenly, thinking doesn't create clarity anymore. It creates paralysis. So it's not that smart people don't have the intelligence to find a way out. Sometimes the problem is that their intelligence keeps building a better and better case for why they should stay exactly where they are. People often call it analysis paralysis, overthinking something so much that you never actually make a decision. And being analytical isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's usually one of your greatest strengths. Analytical people tend to be thoughtful. They're good problem solvers. They look at situations from multiple angles. They don't make reckless decisions. Normally, that's an advantage. But something changes when fear enters the equation. Because fear doesn't stop intelligent people from thinking. It gives them more things to think about. Fear of making the wrong decision, fear of failure, fear of looking stupid, fear of wasting years, fear of ending up in an even worse situation. And suddenly, your intelligence starts working for your fear instead of working for you. Instead of helping you move, it starts building a case for why staying where you are is a safer option. Every risk feels bigger. Every possible mistake feels more expensive. Every decision feels like it could change the rest of your life. So you keep researching, you keep planning, keep thinking, not because you aren't capable, because you're terrified of making the wrong move. And eventually, thinking turns into paralysis. And trust me, I know exactly what that looks like. I've always been analytical. And while that's helped me in a lot of ways, it's also caused me to overthink some of the biggest decisions of my life. Sometimes I overanalyze things so much, I talk myself out of even trying. After college, I took a job in customer support. I remember thinking, I didn't go to college to become a customer service rep, but I had just moved out on my own and needed the money. I told myself, this is temporary. It wasn't. 15 years later, I was still there. It wasn't because I never looked for another job. I did. The problem was, at that time, I was making good money. Between my salary and commissions, walking away suddenly became much more complicated. But I didn't like my work environment. I also hated having to work 12-hour days, 4 to 5 days per week. I remember finding jobs that actually sounded interesting. Then I'd look at the salary and I'd have to take a pay cut. Then another thought. What if this manager is worse? What if I leave and regret it? What if I don't even get an interview? Maybe I'm not qualified. Before I knew it, I talked myself out of even applying for the job. It was never the right time. I was never qualified enough. And the list of reasons to not leave just kept getting longer. And then there was my initial exit plan. It started with learning about Kindle publishing, dropshipping, Amazon FBA, until I finally settled on blogging. I watched videos, took courses, and spent one whole year designing my website before posting a single article. A whole year preparing, planning, designing. I sometimes look back and think, why did it take me a year to launch? I spent so much time designing my website, focusing on everything except the thing that actually mattered, publishing articles. Looking back, I realized I wasn't doing two different things. I was doing the exact same thing in two different areas of my life. I wasn't lacking opportunities. I was building arguments. At work, my mind kept finding reasons not to apply. With my blog, it kept finding reasons not to launch. Different dream, same pattern. What I've realized is that it's so much easier talking about your exit plan, planning it, strategizing, designing it, researching it, doing everything except actually starting it. At this stage, it's safe because as long as it's just still a plan, it can't fail. It also can't succeed. But somehow that feels less scary than failing. So I kept thinking, kept planning, kept waiting for certainty. Not because I wasn't capable, because my fear had convinced my intelligence that staying where I was the smart decision. And that's exactly what I spent years doing. The biggest thing I realized is that I wasn't actually waiting for the right opportunity. I was waiting to feel certain. Certain the next job would be better. Certain the business would work. Certain I wouldn't fail. The problem is, life doesn't give us that kind of certainty. most meaningful decisions have to be made before we know how they'll turn out. That also means accepting two uncomfortable truths. Truth number one: you'll never have enough information to make every decision perfectly. Truth number two: failure isn't evidence you chose the wrong path. Sometimes it's simply evidence that you're doing something you've never done before. That's part of learning any new path. I spent years waiting for certainty that life was never going to give me. So maybe the question isn't, how do I know this will work? Maybe the better question is, how much of my thinking is helping me? And how much of it is simply helping my fear feel logical? Today, I still overthink. I still catch myself looking for certainty. The difference is, now I recognize what I'm doing. I remind myself that certainty isn't something life promises. Most of the decisions that shape our lives have to be made before we know how they'll turn out. So now I still think things through. I still weigh my options, but eventually I make a decision because I've realized that waiting forever isn't a decision free option. That's a decision too. And for years, that was the decision I kept making. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know in the comments, what's one thing you've consistently talked yourself out of doing? And remember, on this channel, we're not just surviving Mondays, we're building our way out.